Good evening and welcome to our session today, focusing in on how to talk to kids about God. My name is Pastor Kaitlin Pabo-Eulberg. I serve as the pastor at Epiphany Lutheran Episcopal Church, as well as the Mission Integration Manager at Providence in Valdez. And I am joined by wonderful Pastor Lisa Smith-Figel. She is the Director of Evangelical Mission in Anchorage, as well as a Lutheran pastor and a mother of 2 kids. So if that's not enough, she's got a lot going on. And she's here today to help us talk about how to talk to your kids about God. So we have this Swan Week of Wellness, and one of the things that has really popped up in this time of wondering about how to be well in the midst of pandemic is having a lot more education happen in your household and a lot more time with your kiddos. So I was wondering, and have been also talking with parents around Valdez about wondering, how do we talk to our children about God? How do kids understand God? And it's really important for us, not only as parents, but educators, leaders in our all of our different roles in the community, to be able to talk about the questions that kids have. So it's really important to talk about God, no matter what your meaning making is or your religion. It's really important because the way that we talk about God shows how we understand ourselves. So if we are atheist, agnostic, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, or etc., we have an opportunity to live out our values and discuss questions about faith with our children and getting to explore their own ideas and questions. So particularly when I asked Lisa to do this, she had mentioned that we are spending more time in our households, and we can see this as an opportunity to be able to delve deeper into relationship with our children about how they're seeing meaning, particularly in the midst of knowing that there's a lot of loss in our country right now. So Lisa, how's it been being a mother of 2 in the midst of pandemic?
Thanks, Kaitlin, and I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me into this space to talk about something that I love, which is my children and children in general, but also that intersection of talking about values and faith and God with children. So I'm glad to be here. So I have 2 kids. Mine are 4 and 7. And I know that this varies across the state, but right now in Anchorage, school is all online. So we're all together all the time at my house. My spouse and I are working from home. So, and I know that many of us have been spending a lot more time in households, like you said, since the beginning of the pandemic in March. And so for us, it's more time to do some of the things that we've already been doing. We've made some conscious decisions to do some intentional faith practices. We're Lutheran Christians. So for us, that looks like prayer, inviting the kids to add their own prayers, singing faith songs, a lot of actions, a lot of hand motions from my age group, and then reading Bible stories, especially at night. And I have just found that when I'm attentive, which is not always as a parent, but when I'm attentive, a lot of times those questions come up, maybe after a Bible story, or after we talk about a prayer request or someone who we know who is sick or having a hard time. Sometimes my kids will just bring up questions about God or faith or life or death at random. So I try to just make that space to listen and to be with them, even if it's not always convenient. I mean, it's not always a convenient time to talk about eternal life, but I try to make that space. And as a first response, I try to say, that's a great question. And often I also like to say, what do you think? And so I do want to share my ideas, though. I'm a seminary educated person. And so I like sharing my ideas after I've had a chance to hear theirs. And I think about how that everybody is doing theology. So theology is talking about God. And I remember that when I was in the seminary, one of my favorite classes was feminist theology from the developing world. And we read these women writers who, most of them were living in poverty amid deep suffering, but they were doing theology because they had important things to say about God and their faith and their values and their relationship with God. So it really came alive for me that everybody can talk about God. It doesn't matter. I mean, Kaitlin and I have collars, but that doesn't matter. I mean, everybody can be a theologian. Even my children, even our children can have these deep questions. And so we can we can learn from them. We can honor their ideas and perspectives. So um, I I think it demystifies it a bit when we can think about everybody being a person who talks about faith or God or values. As a parish pastor years ago, I would see parents defer to me to talk to their kid about God as if I had all the answers. But parents are amazing first and primary teachers of faith and values. So I really encourage parents to be open to any question, share their thoughts, admit when they don't know, and be quick to invite the child to share. Because then faith can be this beautiful shared thing that's this back and forth, honoring the child for their own wisdom, but also a way for that parent to impart whatever their deepest values are.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa. I love that concept of knowing that we all have our own wisdom, parents too, that we can be empowered to say, I know enough to be able to share it with my child and listen to their wisdom. So thank you.
Yeah.
So as we were thinking about how to educate as well as give you all some tools and resources about talking with any children in your life about God, I came across some developmental faith stages that Dr. David Elkind, who is a professor of child studies at Tufts University, he has kind of mapped out some developmental stages and mapped out how children are understanding their faith, their meaning, their values throughout their development. So I wanted to walk you through some of that. And because Lisa has just been walking through with children from birth to now 7, she's going to go through our first stage.
Thanks, Pastor Kaitlin. Yep, this is my lived experience, although certainly both Pastor Kaitlin and I have had a lot of professional encounters with the age 0 to 6 range. So this stage, the Professor David Elkind calls this the global faith stage from 0 to 6. So children are forming safety and trust relationships with adults. That's the primary task, especially 0 to 3, of forming safe and trusted relationships with adults. And then they're forming their higher power, their idea of a higher power, based on the safety and the trust that they're establishing with an adult. So it's so important that they have those safe and trusting relationships with real people in their lives or tangible people. And then they'll be able to transfer some of that sense of faith and trust onto a more abstract higher power. So they're not abstract thinkers at all. They're really literal. If you tell them they went up to heaven, they look to the sky, perhaps. My own child, when we pray, he often will yell up to God, "Hey, God!" Like he'll just sort of scream at the ceiling, which is sort of hilarious. Another sort of literal funny example from my own life is that definitely my son thinks the pastor is Jesus, so he gets that a little bit confused. Even when the pastor's a woman, doesn't seem to matter. We still think it's Jesus. And one time he told me, this was a great conversation. He said, "Mom," he said, "I figured it out." He said, "I'm going to be good at church because Jesus is there, but I can be bad at home because Jesus is not there." I was like, well, we had a conversation about choices and, Jesus is everywhere in our faith system, but it's very literal. Like I saw Jesus at church and he's not here. He's here. He's not here. So this is really literal, and sometimes it's sort of amusing. But making space for that, like, oh, that's an interesting way to think about it. Here's another way mom and dad think about it. Some activities. So Pastor Kaitlin and I will suggest activities then with each stage. So an activity for this one might be intentional spiritual practices here, and I would use the word ritual for that. Definitely the word ritual is important. So we do songs, prayers, anything you can act out tangibly. In our tradition, we light a candle every year when the child has their baptism anniversary, but other people have different traditions around candles or things that are tangible are awesome. That's really helpful. So I think it doesn't matter if you identify as a Christian or any particular religion. The word ritual is really important. Because you can do things that maybe you don't necessarily think as spiritual, but we can name them as powerful rituals because they create a sense of safety and trust. So, for example, you can clean up the park every spring, and that's a family ritual that has meaning and value. You have pizza and movie on a Friday. That's a ritual because it creates a sense of structure and safety and family connectedness, and that's a value. I was telling Pastor Kaitlin, I know a family who puts up garden gnomes every spring. And there's all these silly stories that go with the gnomes and a tradition of where they go. And it's a spiritual experience to be together in this shared family joyful activity. So I just really lift up ritual and those repetitive practices at this age as something that makes us feel safe for young folks, but also can be really deeply meaningful and spiritual.
That's lovely. So I'm going to shift us to what happens when your kids get a little bit older. So we have our second stage, which is roughly between ages 7 to 12, and that's the concrete faith. So as kids get a bit older, they're really grounded in having clear, concrete, right or wrong, black and white, focus in on what's fair, what's just, and they're really looking at their own experiences. They're connecting those rituals and that trust that you build when you're younger. They're really connecting that to their faith life. So spiritual identity is mostly likely connected to their personal experience and or a religious practice if they have it. I.e., so someone would say, oh, I'm Jewish because I go to the Jewish synagogue. So because they grew up going to this place, they know, okay, that's me. Or I'm Christian because I go to a Christian church. So you would think of that rather than I'm Christian because of my faith. They would say, I'm Christian because I put my body into a community every week. So then for activities for kids who are that age, it's really good to have those rituals. Like Lisa was saying, having those concrete rituals that are really powerful when you're really young, but it can be really good to remember to light a candle. I have one right here. And being able to tell a story and remind people that we have these rituals to connect us to our personal experience. So trying to bridge the gap between the place that they can feel, yes, that's where I have faith, and then their personal experience. And it's really, children might be asking a lot of good questions at this point, and it's important to hold and answer these questions with respect and care. And I also had another thing I wanted to highlight. Something that we do have at our church is we have communion. So we have a meal together, and something that we offer our kiddos is that we have little cloth bread, and we have the words on there that say what we share in this meal together, this meal of Jesus. And we have our chalice of juice as well. And so our kids will hold on to this, and then they watch to see what I'm doing in the service, and then they'll lift it up when I'm lifting it up. So that's something that we've done to try and make sure that people can have that concrete experience they can touch, and connect it to their own personal experience of faith. Any other thoughts, Lisa, on that stage?
Only other thing I was going to say was two things Pastor Kaitlin and I discussed in our preparation is that sometimes in this age, perhaps related to children having gone to school, I'm noticing a transition in sometimes my son wants to give me the right answer. I feel like when we have conversations. So I really am nudging still as I move into concrete faith with my older child. What do you think? What are your ideas, and affirming those, because I think there is can be a sense of conformity that children can begin to embrace, which has some place, but not the whole story. And then the only other thing I'd say is to sort of encourage their own individual thinking and lifting that up. Kids at this age I think are getting great at self-expression, whether that's writing or drawing. Writing is pretty painful, 0 to 6, but it's getting a lot easier. And so just, I would say making space for self-expression around any of these questions around faith through art or the written word could be really awesome for this age, as they're getting much more skilled at art and or writing.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So then we get in from age 12 into teen years, and that is a stage that Dr. David Elkind calls personal faith. So teens can start to feel that experience of closeness with God, so they're starting to connect their religious experience or their meaning making that they've had in their families with a personal experience with God. So building a further on their own experience of saying, this is who I feel I have a relationship with, and this is my higher power, something bigger than me. So in this, God can become a secret keeper. So you can pray to God or talk with God and know that God's not going to tell anybody what God's not going to, it's like writing a diary. God's not going to show it to everybody. So it's a place you can go to and have trust in. And it's normal for any child, no matter what religious, spiritual background to have spiritual questions, particularly at this time. And I remember as a young child staying up late at night and I couldn't go to sleep because I was just like, I need to know what happens. I need to like figure out, is God real? And I had all those questions keeping me up at night around this stage. So it's important to ask kids clear questions to say, like, so what are you thinking about with God? What are you thinking about with faith? Because they're probably wondering it, but they don't think that it's something to talk about because they're delving into it deeply, perhaps just introspectively. So they could also, as teens are grasping their own sense of identity, they're grasping with this idea of like, so if I'm, realizing who I am, then what are the laws of nature? What's the thing that's not going to change? What's eternity? And so they're wondering about all of these things. So embracing those questions and allowing for all those to pop up is really important. And that gets into an activity. When I think about how to engage teens around faith, it's really important for teens to have a trusted adult or mentor that is not a parent. That could be another family member who's like an aunt and uncle or a grandparent. It could be someone that's part of your friend group. But knowing that there's someone that's safe to be able to ask questions to, and someone that you can figure out also cares about you, not just because they have a parental relationship, but because they're invested in this child growing up and being able to have good meaning making. And that could be a pastor, it could be a spiritual leader, it could be a teacher, but knowing that that's a really important stage. Teens especially really need trusted adults. And one of the ways that we have that in the Lutheran tradition, Lutheran and Episcopal tradition, is that we have a program called confirmation. So this is when kids get to spend time with trusted adults in the church where they delve into questions. They delve into Bible stories. They delve into hard faith questions about afterlife. And they bring all of the issues that they have or the questions that are coming up for them around their identity as well as the identity of a higher power. They bring those and they get to discuss it in a safe place. And then at the end of that, they get to say, I want to be a part of this community. I want to say, this is what I'm feeling about my faith, and I want to own it. And so then they have more ownership of that. And so that's an activity, but really mainly it's being in relationship. So making sure that the kids in your life have trusted adult mentors. Anything that you would add, Lisa?
I think the only thing I would add, I'm not at this stage yet, I'm getting there. Just two things. I've heard friends of mine with older children say that you think your kids ask you a lot of questions now. They're going to ask you maybe less, and it's not as predictable, but your kids still really need you when you're a teenager. And so just to create those spaces, whatever those look like, where your teenager knows they can come to you. They might not at that moment. They might come next week, but just that children know, those teenagers know that you're making some spaces and they can access you. And then the last thing I was going to say about that confirmation program, since both Kaitlin and I have taught that in the pastoral role, is I remember that our youth in confirmation really like learning about world religions, and kids have the abstract ability at that point to start doing that. And I think, especially it's a great time to learn how to be a global citizen, to learn to respect other perspectives. They can kind of hold that intention better at that age, that, oh, I might believe this, but my neighbor believes this. And that's such a healthy life skill to learn to appreciate and value different people's cultural and religious and other spiritual traditions. So my students, we were Lutheran Christians, they loved going to the synagogue. We went to the Jewish synagogue in Anchorage every year. It was a total highlight. And I heard from parents too that was really meaningful for them to be able to learn and grow. So just looking for those opportunities to enhance diversity, which I think brings us to Kaitlin's next point about the openness of the spiritual and faith possibilities.
Yeah, so I have a few resources here that I wanted to share that are some books, and they bring up for me, I've been looking very carefully at books because as a pastor, I am really focused in on how can we talk about God in a way that best describes God. Because when when Lisa was talking about theology, words about God, we're always one step away from God. So we could say all these things about who God is, but we're never going to actually get there. But it's really important that the words we use are inclusive and can make space for people to be who they are and to know that God, we were all created in God's image. If we are from the Judeo-Christian religion, we hold that in our sacred text that we were created in God's image. So knowing that God is bigger than any words we're going to put on this higher being spirit, and God is not gendered. God is bigger than any gender. And so God is bigger than race. God's bigger than sex. God's bigger than gender. And we have a lot of metaphors for God that are really powerful in the Judeo-Christian church. So we have God as a solid rock. We also have God as a mother hen who gathers in her chicks all together into safety. And it's really important to give your child some diverse metaphors for God so that they can see themselves as in God. And so when I'm picking books for us to have at our church, I want to make sure that the books highlight diverse people so that they know, oh yeah, these people are loved by God. So this is God's Dream. It's written by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and it's really wonderful because it has diverse folks in there. So it can really highlight, yes, all people are loved and seen and are appreciated by God. And so that helps people see, oh yeah, me too, I'm included in this circle that becomes a heart. And I also have a couple books too that link in sacred life. So when Lisa was talking about ritual and how important it is to have ritual, that means anything. So when we think about ritual, we might think only a religious practice, but really we are creating meaning in our families and in our lives all the time. And so there's books you can get that remind you of sacred life. So there's sacredness and then there's ritual in your rhythms already. And honoring that and noticing that can be wonderful and really important. And particularly when we talk about God as being bigger than all genders and all races, it's really important when we talk about, if you're Christian, Jesus, that Jesus was a brown-skinned Jewish rabbi. So when I'm looking for books to have with children, to read with children, I'm making sure that Jesus reflects who Jesus was, a Middle Eastern man. So it's really important to, when you're looking for books, make sure that you have the correct Jesus. You're not just having white Jesus all over. So it's really important to remember that all the stories in the Bible are about Middle Eastern people. So making sure that reflects that. And we're going to do this imperfectly, but it's really good to just pay attention to the ways that your children are implicitly understanding who God is. So making sure that includes brown people and making sure that includes knowing that Jesus, yes, Middle Eastern man. So being able to look at that and pay attention to that. Let's see. Something I did want to highlight just in general for children is that sometimes, particularly in the younger ages, metaphors and abstract concepts can be really tough for kids to understand. So it's important to know that when you say something, they might see it completely differently than what you thought. So we have a tradition in the Lutheran Church called Ash Wednesday, where folks come to church and we are reminded that we come from dust and we will go into dust. And we mark people with ashes with the sign of the cross, and we say, to dust you came, and then to dust you will go. And it's a mention of our own mortality and that we're part of a bigger story. But we had one kid who was about 5 or 6 that was terrified because he thought that if he got marked, it meant he was going to die like right then. And so he had that huge traumatic experience because he didn't really understand what was going on. And so it's really important to explain why we're doing something so that we mark this cross with ash saying we are part of a bigger community and that God loves us, God sees us, and we are going to be held from the moment we're born to the moment that we die and on. And so it's really powerful to be able to frame that in ways that kids can understand. It's also really important when kids are asking questions to focus in on the sticky points and to know that it's not really helpful to sugarcoat it or to lie, particularly when we are talking about hard concepts like death. Children really need to know what's going on in a way that's developmentally appropriate, but to lie or to just kind of smooth it over can create breaches in trust. So they're like, what is true if someone's not telling me the actual truth? And kids are paying attention. They can kind of know what's happening and how you're reacting to them. So it's really important to tell truth to the kids in ways that they can understand it. And something that I really think is so important is that young people are part of our church right now, in part as for me as a pastor. I realize that the kiddos in our church are not just the future of the church, but they are the church right now. These are little theologians, like Pastor Lisa said earlier. These are people that have wise experiences of spiritual beings. And it's really important to honor that, and to honor that if a child is going to create what we would call as adults maybe chaos or a little bit of mess in that, I think that is God. That is God working through them, and it's beautiful. And that is more important to me than having a very orderly religious experience. So just wanted to highlight that kids are like higher beings of themselves, and we can honor them and appreciate them for what they bring.
Thanks, Kaitlin. I was just going to add a little bit about the tough questions here, as I know we're moving to a close. I definitely have gotten my share of tough questions, and I have found that it can be helpful to find out what the child is really asking before we launch into a long explanation. If we are going to give a long explanation about death or any other sort of tricky or sticky question, or that's something that's hard for us to talk about. I mean, sometimes it starts with us as parents trying to get clear on what we think and what we believe. That can actually be the primary task before we maybe try to articulate that. I did not know that parenting would be such a journey of self-growth, but it is, as it turns out. So I guess that pre-work is yourself first, but then when a child asks a question, like if that child asks, what happens when we die? I might try to find out what are they really asking before I give too much information, especially if it might not be developmentally appropriate. So for example, I did get questions from my 3-year-old or 2 and 3-year-old, but I remember saying, God loves us now when we're alive, and God loves us when we die and takes care of us. And that was enough information for a while. And then at some point, my children wanted some more information about bodies and where do the bodies go. And so then we moved into that later. But I think it's helpful to find out what they're asking and if there's something behind the question. So, great question. Did you hear something about that? Or another question is there something you're scared of? Because sometimes if we can help the child name an emotion or fear behind a question, if there is, that might direct our answer more than, are they just looking for technical information, or are they looking to connect or to share a deep vulnerability or a deep feeling? Pastor Kaitlin and I were joking as we prepared that I had an acquaintance whose child asked her something about sex. And so the parent went into a long explanation involving sperms and eggs. And later on, she found out the child just wanted to know if the baby grew in the mommy's tummy. So we don't always need to give every bit of information. We can find out what the child is really wanting, and then we can move toward always telling the truth, but we might move toward the information and adding it on as the child is inquiring and as they're seeming developmentally ready for it.
Well, that is so wonderful. I'm so grateful for your wisdom, Pastor Lisa. And thank you all for tuning in with us. And we'd love to hear about some questions that you have. There will be some little discussion topics that you can add some of your thoughts and maybe sticky points. And I will make sure to be looking at that. But thank you so much for allowing us to give you some resources and tools, and know that you have the wisdom inside of you to be able to do this, and know that you're doing more than you think already.
Pandemic parents, you are doing a great job. Keep it up. You got this.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you.